Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the late start, but still having the odd technical issue. So welcome all those who are online watching, and welcome to councillors. Before I start, can I ask that everybody make sure their mobile phones are off or on running on silent. I'll ask Councillor Gary Turlin to do the acknowledgement of country, please.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today.
Thank you. I'll do civic prayer. Almighty God, from whom comes every good and perfect gift, we give you thanks for the blessings you bestow upon us in this Shire. Grant to those who hold office in this council the spirit of justice and truth, of wisdom and charity, that mindful of our responsibility, we may promote the welfare of your people and advance the common good. Amen. There's no apologies, all councillors are present. We have the adoption of the extraordinary meeting to be held, that was held on the 24th of August. Would somebody like to move the...
Move that way.
Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Whipper. Is there any discussion? I put it, all in favour, those against, carried. Minutes then, any declarations of...
No, we've got minutes of the ordinary.
We have minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 24th of
Move that way.
August.
Move that way.
Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Turlin. Any discussion on the correctness? And I put them all in favour, against, carried. Now we move on to declarations of interest. Anybody with declarations of interest? Nil. There is a mayoral minute that has been circulated. Is in relation to the agenda that was the letter of performance improvement order under section 438A of the Local Government Act. And there is a recommendation there that I'll move from the chair with the seconder, Councillor Halstead. And is there anybody wish to make comment? Councillor Turlin, did you like?
Question. In the doc, sorry.
Question?
Yeah, in the document that you sent out, emailed to us yesterday, and in your mayoral minute, there is a difference between the last part of the mayoral minute, 38 A, B, C and D. You've got H. H is not in the recommendations from the schedules from the minister. So why do we have a H in your recommendation that's not in the minister's recommendation?
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. I will pass that over to Ms. Lidgard, and I'll ask her to explain the reasoning behind that.
So H is included because it talks about how councillors need to comply with the advisors. So the minister's letter, is it the letter? So if you look at the 4th paragraph in the letter, it refers to 438H of the Act. In the mayoral minute, we've just included exactly what is stated in 438. So that additional information was provided to you, so you knew what was required.
So explain to me where it is in the schedules, please.
Not in the schedules, it's in the letter from the minister. If you go to the 4th paragraph.
Yeah, it might be in the letter, but the schedules of what we approved at the extraordinary meeting And now we have a difference between the schedule signed by the minister and a letter by the minister.
Look,
It's different.
councillor Turland, the letter from the minister is the letter from the minister. What is the discussed from the extraordinary meeting can be overtaken by what has been sent by the minister.
And it's 438H is just the how the advisors will function in their role.
Okay?
So it sits in the Local Government Act, so we have to.
It might be, I'm not saying that, but it's in the schedules of what we went through and what we were understanding the performance order is. And now we have a 438H. And as it says, I bring it to your attention, section 438H of the Act. It's not in the schedules.
It doesn't need to be in the schedule.
No, it's a requirement of the Act when the performance improvement order is served on council.
If advisors are appointed under 438G, it has to be functioned under 438H.
One follows the other.
Okay, so it's a bit like reading a part of an act and then you go down to part C or D of that section.
I disagree with you.
Well, I'm sorry, councillor Turland. The mayoral minute is standing that has been presented. If you wish not to vote for it or vote against it, then that's fine.
Not in the schedules.
Thank you, councillor Turland. Is there any other comments in relation to the letter from the minister? Councillor Halstead.
I just want to support what's been put up in the mayoral minute. There may be some discrepancy, I'm not sure about that, but look, the intent of it is very clear, and that is we've got to take this matter very seriously, and I'm sure, if not all, most councillors sitting there are probably taking it seriously, but I, for one, will take it very seriously indeed, and we must work towards coming out at the end with a council that operates appropriately. Now, I don't expect any negatives to that sort of a comment. Quite frank, it's pretty straightforward, and I'll be complying with it.
Thank you, councillor Halstead, and I think your words are extremely wise, and I will be extremely disappointed, as will councillors, if they don't. That is my understanding, reading between the lines. So I endorse the mayoral minute, obviously, and thank the Honourable Shelley Hancock for sending this through. It is something which I don't think any councillor really wants, but in my opinion, it was getting to a position that we would have become dysfunctional, and that would have even seen greater consequences. So we haven't been notified at this stage as when the advisors will take up their positions, but that will, as said earlier in the day at the briefing session, that'll all become a little bit more obvious as time goes on. So I can only support the comments that councillor Halstead has made and suggest to all councillors that you go ahead with the advisors being present in the spirit that it should be done. So if there's no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried?
Seconded.
Yeah, councillor Halstead seconded.
Oh, okay. It wasn't on the screen.
You want to,
Okay, well, it doesn't need a seconder, but councillor Halstead did second it.
you want to put it back up through the system again?
Yep.
Okay, so there it is. So we now move on to page 2, 9.1, development application.
No, public forum.
Public forum, yes, we have public forum. Cricket ground at Centennial Park. Mr. Matthew Watson, are you in? Yes. Good afternoon, Matthew. Mr. Watson.
Just connecting his audio.
Hang on, he's coming in, testing his audio. Can you hear us now, Mr. Watson? cricket ground at Centennial Park. Mr. Matthew Watson, are you in? Yes. Good afternoon, Matthew. Mr. Watson.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors.
Okay, Mr. Watson, could you turn off your background, the Facebook, please?
Is that better?
Yes, that's good. So you've been briefed on the time frame, so away you go.
Okay, thank you kindly for the opportunity to speak. The trigger for the Brian Martin Oval proposal goes back to last year when the Mayor proposed having something local named after a former Mayor who incidentally is still alive. The oval at Centennial Park was identified by council staff as per that proposal. That set off a chain reaction of sorts locally. A lot of people in the cricket community got talking and said that oval, if it should be named after anyone, should be named after Mr. Brian Martin, who is known as Mr. Cricket and who has a 26-year involvement with local cricket. Brian led the redevelopment of that oval 12 years ago. The oval was derelict. The civil works, the installation of the pitch, the nets, the fencing, the drainage, Brian's fingerprints all over it. Brian is known for maintenance year in, year out, and coaching year in, year out, volunteering his time. He never charges. It is also the home ground of Barrel Blues Cricket Club, which Brian has run for many years. In October last year, we made an approach to council and said, look, could we name this facility or apply to name this facility after Mr. Martin? And the answer was, yes, you can, but you are going to have to make a case. You will have to get public support. And we did. And the response was overwhelming from clubs, players, teams, coaches, umpires, schools, administrators and families across the district. Some special mentions, Lauren Cheetle and Dom O'Shannessy. They both have baggy green caps. They both represent Australia and have done so from a very young age. They were both coached by Brian from a very young age, and one of them still is. Barry Knight, Doug Walters, Cricket New South Wales, even Jackie Myers, the editor of our local paper, have also written in with very favourable endorsement and involvement also from Latte Life, Win News and 2ST. To put that support beyond doubt, the matter went to a member vote at the Highlands District Cricket Association Ordinary General Meeting on Monday night. Many members spoke in favour, no one spoke against, and the matter was passed as a special resolution which seals the support of the association. In June this year, Council's former General Manager sent us a letter announcing a new draft namings policy from Council and that our proposal would be considered in line with this. But the detail revealed clauses such as you have to be dead or have an affinity with not only the proposed site, but the land around it for at least 20 years before such a site can be named after you. This was 8 months after we first approached Council and after we chased up public support. The result was a petition with 100 expressions of opposition and even more support for Brian Martin Oval, and call for the matter to be dealt with as a standalone matter. So here we are. When you combine the initial written support, the petition support and social media support, we are talking about support in the hundreds. We want to be clear, we have never asked for Centennial Park to be renamed. Our ask is that the unnamed oval within Centennial Park be named after Mr. Martin. Council staff advised us from the outset very clearly that Council has jurisdiction to name facilities or infrastructure within a reserve after people who are still alive, and the Geographical Names Board concurs. They say the oval itself is a facility / infrastructure within an existing reserve, and therefore Council would decide this matter, not the naming board, not the Names Board. The Names Board also advises there are exceptions at the local level to such facilities being named after people who are alive. And let's remember there's a rich history of local facilities here. being named after people who were and are alive. Bradman Oval, Bill O'Reilly Oval, Corbett Gardens, Winifred West Park, David Woods playing field, the list goes on. People can always hunt for reasons to cut something down, to make up new rules or shift the posts, but please remember the community has spoken in favour of this for a long time. Striking this out under option 1 would not meet community expectations. Option 2, putting the matter on public exhibition and taking it to the Geographical Names Board, would be kicking the can down the road or kicking the matter into touch, yet again after nearly 12 months. Option 3, let's quote option 3, that council approve request to...
Mr. Watson,
Yes?
your time has expired, sir. I'm sorry, and there, under the LG rules, there is no extension given. You have put your case pretty strongly. I can say that to you.
Mayor, I would just finish, if I may, by saying option 3 proves that council can vote for this and seal it right here and now. The community can only hope that you get this right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. So being public forum, there are no questions nor comments from councillors at this point of time. That will happen later on during the meeting. So we now move on to 9.1, visitor items. Development application 20/0747, student accommodation in association with the existing Frensham School at 51 Range Road, Mittagong. Mr. Clive West will address council against the development. And Mr. Wester, you are on screen now, sir. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you very much, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, yes, I can.
Okay, so your time, you know the drill. So your time starts now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to make this presentation today. We are not seeking a refusal of the DA, merely a deferral and a recommendation to Frensham that they meet with their own wildlife experts and who have been providing environmental education to Frensham students for many years and using this site expressly for that purpose. We also seek that the DA be referred to Council's Environment and Sustainability Division and to Council's Environment and Sustainability Committee, which is to meet next Wednesday. The Developers Biodiversity Report is based on sightings or evidence of a very limited range of species. The wildlife experts who have worked with Frensham strongly contest this. The report does not mention the platypus seen in the river, nor kangaroos, swamp wallabies, echidnas and possums. And you can see on the slide in front of you, that's a part of the range of species that are there. In fact, there's a lengthy list of species. Slide 2, please. This is a photo of a platypus that was seen in the Lower Holt. The photo was taken by a Frensham student. The report calls for the removal of all the wombats from their long-established habitat. The development is in fact to be built on top of the major Wisdom, which is the colony of wombats. Contrary to popular belief, wombats are social animals, and whilst they occupy their own individual burrows, they coexist in the Wisdoms. The resulting dispersal will lead to many wombat deaths as they search for new habitat. The fact that the environmental education facility is to be situated in a location which requires the destruction of the very habitat to be studied indicates a misguided contradiction in thinking behind the choice of this site. There are several cleared areas within the Lower Holt that would not require any bushland to be cleared. Slide 3, please. Here is an aerial view of the Frensham land showing at least 4 alternative cleared sites, and I'm sure there are more. Slide 4, please. Here is a photo of the bush pitch. Its vicinity to residences can be addressed with heavy screening, appropriate setbacks and vehicular access from the main gate on Range Road. This site is the subject of Land for Wildlife, a Land for Wildlife agreement with Council, and another reason for Council to refer it to their Environment Division. It is also within the major riparian zone that runs along the Natai River. The majority of trees to be removed are radiatas, but there are still 85 eucalypts to be felled. The existing radiatas could be replaced with native trees over time and thus form part of the students' environment education. please defer this DA until Council's Environment Division and Advisory Committee has an opportunity to examine it. And slide 5, please. That's the cricket pitch that can be used as an alternative site, and you can address the nearby residences with buffer zones and so forth. Slide 5. This is a particularly poignant photograph, and it shows one of the Frensham students next to a baby kangaroo, a baby joey, and it really shows just the pristine or the wonderful nature of this habitat. And so we're really pleading to you to have this matter deferred and have the experts look at the situation.
Thank you. The visitor item. So does any councillor have any questions to Mr. West? No. Thank you, Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. West, thank you for your presentation. Could you advise whether you think community consultation in the fullest should be part of this?
Well, I think in a sense, if it's referred to the Environment and Sustainability Committee, that is part of the community consultation. But I think if it's referred to that committee and also to the Environment Division, then we can look at whether or not there needs to be wider consultation. But I think as the minimum, the experts who've been working in this habitat should really be in a position to be able to talk to Frensham.
Thank you. It's the responses we got that lead me to think that a public meeting might be encouraged. We might encourage Frensham to do that too. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could respond to that, Councillor Scandrett. Look, I think public meetings and so forth may not be necessary if we get the right outcome today and the right outcome in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. West. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor House, Councillor Turley.
Yeah, only Mr. West, on the environment, and I agree with everything you said, but there's other people that might want to have a view in relation to this development. So I don't think we should not allow them in a potential public meeting in the future.
Question, is that a question or just a statement?
No, I just want to reinforce that, and hope Mr. West agrees, that it's all the public needs to be.
At the moment, please.
I can't hear what you're saying. You're cutting in when I'm talking.
No, because you're not asking a question.
I'm asking Mr. West if he's happy with the whole public process of a public information session.
No, that wasn't the question. Okay, Mr. West, I think, has answered that prior. Okay, no other questions? Thank you, Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the other councillors too.
Thank you. So we go now to Ms. Erin Dethridge, who will address council in favour of the development. Good afternoon, Ms. Dethridge.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors.
Okay, you have your time starts any time from now on, and questions will be asked if necessary after your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. As the town planning consultant on behalf of the applicant, we would like to thank council for the thorough assessment report for the application. We support the recommendation of the council officer and accept the draft conditions of consent. This development is an important project for Frensham to deliver its curriculum. The applicant has worked with its consultant team to determine an appropriate bush setting within its campus while minimising environmental impacts. The proposal has addressed the issues raised in the submissions and has received endorsement by the Rural Fire Service, Water New South Wales and the Natural Resources Access Regulator, as well as support from council officers in all teams. I'm aware that there has been some community interest in this application and understand the key concerns relate to the location of the development within the bushland and the proposed tree removal. I further understand that there has been a suggestion that the development could be relocated elsewhere on the campus, such as the neighbouring bush pitch. The bush pitch to the east of the development site is integral to the school and is part of the facilities used to host the weekend sporting competition that includes 32 schools and is attended by around 1,200 people each weekend. Without the bush pitch, the school would not have the capacity to host this competition each week. The purpose of the development is to deliver bush-style accommodation that connects students to the natural world in order to make a positive contribution to human health and embrace new learning opportunities. Students will have the opportunity to live and exist within the natural environment within a safe and secure part of the campus, yet remain totally connected to essential elements of school life. Minimising impacts to local flora and fauna was a key driver of the design and location of the development, particularly given the program it supports is aimed at changing students' attitudes towards environmental issues. The buildings adopt a range of sustainability initiatives, and the required tree removal includes 164 pine trees, which are an environmental weed species within the Wingecarribee Shire. The school is committed to improving the natural environment of this area by removing a large number of exotic and weed species and rehabilitating the area over time by introducing native species, which will ensure significant improvements to the environmental quality of this area. In closing, the proposal is environmentally and technically sound and will not adversely or significantly impact on the community despite their concerns. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon, and I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can on the application.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dettridge. Councillor McLaughlin, question? You're muted, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Dettridge, for your presentation. You mentioned that the bush cricket pitch is constantly used. My information is that that it hasn't been used for many, many years. Is that correct? When was the last time it was used?
Look, I'm not exactly sure exactly when it was last used, but I understand it is regularly used for weekend sport
Thank
as
you.
part of the competition and also as part of the school's sporting curriculum.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Tyrrell, then Councillor Nelson.
Thank you very much. May I ask if you had a look at where the other opportunities might be that has been flagged by Mr. West?
I did just see his slide that he put up that showed 3 or 4 other alternative locations. I guess, look, those sites are cleared sites, so they wouldn't, I guess, meet the intention of delivering a bush style accommodation that essentially immerses or connects the students within that natural environment.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks very much. Do you know, is it the school's intention to take this matter to the Land and Environment Court if the matter is refused?
I cannot comment on that at this point in time. That we have not discussed that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whipper, then Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Dettridge, you made a comment about what could I say, instilling a sense of appreciation for environment among the students. Don't you see a bit of a disconnect between an appreciation and the destruction of that habitat?
I guess we don't see it as destruction. Certainly the school has engaged a biodiversity expert, and their assessment, which has been supported by Council's flora and fauna consultant, determined that it would have minimal impacts on flora and fauna within this area, and those minimal impacts can be offset by the credit requirements and also the additional replanting within the riparian zone.
So you're telling me that those offsets would be directly back into that site?
No, it's kind of twofold. So some of it will be as part of the credit, but then Council's draft conditions of consent have recommended a further requirement for replanting at a ratio of 2 to 1. So that's, I guess, in addition to the credit requirements.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Scandron.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Has the school conducted any consultation with the community or its own community or its old girls, if you wish?
Look, this application obviously went on public exhibition through the council processes, but I'm not aware of any direct community consultation from the school.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Halstead.
Very quick one, and I don't expect a long answer. Do you, lady presenting, do you believe that this development has maintained or will maintain ecologically sustainable development? I have great concerns that, in my opinion, it does not.
Ms Etheridge.
Look, certainly the school is committed to improving the environmental quality of this area. So, you know, we'll obviously be removing the environmental weed species, but then they'll be rehabilitating it with new plantings over time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms Etheridge. And we will we'll now move on to the application report. So we now move on to 9.1, which is the application for student accommodation at 51 Range Road, Mittagong, Frensham School. I think it would be very wise to have an introduction, councillors.
All right.
So,
Just flagging, Mr. Mayor, a motion as well.
Yes, so just so everyone is aware, Councillor Whipper sent through a motion this afternoon prior to the council meeting in relation to the DA application. So that will go up on the screen after the introduction by Mr. Wilton. Good afternoon, Mr. Wilton.
Afternoon. Through the chair, the purpose of this report is to consider DA 200747, which seeks development consent for the purposes of student and staff accommodation, including a multifunction centre at 51 Range Road, Mittagong. The Frensham School site is located on an 18.9 hectare parcel of land that is traversed by the Napo River, contains a significant stand of Southern Highlands shale woodland ecological community, including eucalyptus that are koala feed tree species as well. The site is both bushfire prone and it's also flood prone. The land zoned R2 residential and education facilities are prohibited development within the zone. The proposed use is permissible, however, by virtue of the State Environmental Planning Policy, Education Establishments and Childcare 2017. The merits of the proposal include 6 student cabins, all being single story, housing up to 72 students, each with an area of 130 square metres. 2 staff cabins, all being single story, occupying an area of 160 square metres each. A multi-purpose hall, a single story construction, occupying an area of 650 square metres, and a central fire pit and also communal seating. The application also identifies additional provision of 5 car spaces. The application has a footprint of a proposed development of to remove 266 trees. 266 trees to be retained, and a further 249 are identified for removal, including species that are the Southern Highlands shale woodland. The application is supported by a BDAR assessment report and is seeking to rely upon the biodiversity credits under the Biodiversity Act. The trigger for the BDAR report is clearing in excess of 0.25 hectares. And the application proposes direct clearing of 0.63 and approximately 3.5 hectares of thinning and underscrubbing for bushfire protection purposes. Council staff have recommended that in addition to any credits applied for under the Act, the developer should be required to provide 2-for-1 replacement of the Southern Highlands shale woodland species, and that will be placed in the riparian zone in accordance with the draft conditions of consent. Neighbour notification process is undertaken by council, attracted 40 submissions detailing issues associated with ecology, lighting, student safety, neighbouring amenity, car parking and also commercial use of the site. Response to those submissions have been provided on pages 7 to 12 of the report this evening. Council staff undertake an assessment in accordance with section 4.15 and have recommended approval on this occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Wilton. Are there questions from councillors? Councillor Scandron?
Mr. Wilton, could you just confirm how this application was promoted to the community and how many responses you got? Thank you.
Mr. Wilton?
Through the chair, the application's been notified in accordance with council's community participation plan, which requires neighbouring properties adjoining the lot to be notified, plus a notice was placed on the site and it was also advertised in the local newspaper.
But may I ask, were the newspapers in print at the time, or were they just the online editions?
Through the General Manager, Acting General Manager.
Through the chair, I believe that they were in print at the time.
Right, thank you. Other questions from other councillors? Councillor Turl and then Councillor Andrews.
The bushfire issue, and after last year and this year, do you think we've got enough emergency exits in relation to this potential site?
Mr. Wilton, through you, Acting General Manager.
Through the chair, this application is what they consider to be a special bushfire protection purpose, and it was referred through to the Rural Fire Service under Section 100B of the Rural Fires Act. They have provided their bushfire concurrence in relation to that, and they're of the opinion that both the access and egress to the site are adequate.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Wilton, if you wouldn't mind, please, the biodiversity report. I'm wondering if you could just enlighten me on the process and by whom it was.
Through you, Acting General Manager. Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair, because of the tree removal that has occurred on that site, or is proposed to occur on the site, under the Biodiversity Act, it triggers a requirement for a BDAR assessment report to be provided. Essentially, council utilises the services of a specialist contractor in relation to the assessment of that proposal. There was some shortfalls which were addressed by a request for further additional information. That has satisfied council's requirements and accordingly has formed part of the assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Mr. Wilton, I have a question. Do you know how many radiata pines there are on the site other than the 164? And could those 164 radiata pines be removed without a DA?
Through the chair, I couldn't comment on the number of radiata pines on the site. Those radiata pines that are not associated with a heritage item can be removed without development consent. They are considered to be an environmental weed according to our development control plan.
Thank you. Councillor Whipper, it's a big development, so away you go. Second.
Thank you. Mr. Wilton, just a point of clarification. We were on site this morning. We had a look at those pines. I would like clarification as to whether or not they're actually radiata or Monterey pines, because I don't believe Monterey pines are designated as an environmental weed.
Through you, the chair, Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair, the information that I've received is that they are the same. Radiata and also Monterey pines are the same, and accordingly, that's what was.
Councillor Whipper, I asked exactly the same question.
They didn't look like radiators to me anyway.
Monterey, through Mr. Google, told me it's on the west coast of, the east coast of California. And as such, these are they can be called Monterey or radiata.
Maybe we could get clarification later, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm just clarifying it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions to Mr. Wilton? Okay. Then Councillor Whipper has put up a notice of motion, not a notice of motion, it's just a motion. Yep. So this will be the motion as opposed to the recommendation. And I think it's been circulated to all councillors prior to the meeting. So,
I believe that Councillor Halstead is going to second that motion as well, Mr. Mayor.
So I can't see Councillor Halstead. Do yours? Oh, there he is. Councillor.
Yes. Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, councillor Whipper, you have the right to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, councillors, we did a site inspection this morning, and I think we all got a sense of the value of that vegetation there. Over many years, I know there's been a lot of pressure in that area, Colo Street, and incrementally, my concern is that these corridors are starting to be broken up. I know Frensham have been associated with the Shire for a long time, and they make a wonderful contribution to community. And I believe as such that it's only appropriate that they might engage the community in these discussions, because not only did we get 40 quite strong submissions when this went out on exhibition, raising really serious and genuine concerns about impacts to not only the environment, but to the habitat of that site as well. We must have received over the last, 3 or 4 days, around about 80 emails that equally raised serious concerns. Now, I don't think that we should just turn a blind eye to that, councillors. It's really important to keep that connectivity and those corridors for wildlife movement. It's critically important. We know that there are some more vacant sites on the land of Frensham, and I'm suggesting that it's not a case of this being the wrong development, but certainly that it's the development in the wrong place. I can't really understand why we would put this pressure on the wildlife that uses that habitat there. Now, an environmental, an EEC, an endangered environmental community, I think, from my understanding, represents about 14% of that vegetation type that's left in existence. They're very critical. I'm suggesting as well, and I can't understand why the consultants haven't supported the fact that this be referred off to the federal government under the EPBC Act, because I think that's where it should be. I think that it's very important that we get that feedback from the federal government that overrides, I think, what one consultant versus another consultant's opinion might be. So each of us have got an intergenerational responsibility. I'm concerned that this education process for the students is sending all the wrong messages out, because there seems to be a bit of a disconnect in a philosophy that says we want to instill education into the students by destroying the very habitat that we want to study. I think that's really dangerous precedent to be setting, and I think it's something we need to be mindful of, councillors. If we look at the first page of our report on page 2, the link to the community strategic plan says straight out, the idea is to conserve key natural resources of the Shire and minimise the impact from development. This is a classic example of us being put to the test, councillors. And I think at the very least, we need to refer and include community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So we've got councillor Scandrett, and then did you have your hand up, councillor McLaughlin? Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett, then councillor Halstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Whipper. That's a very good motion. I'd like to also support that, and particularly the fact that you've included community consultation, because I'm a bit concerned that this wasn't properly consulted. When I called it up to council with Councillor Nelson earlier this year, I thought that would make sure it did. But look, whether the newspaper that would have been advertised in was printed or not, the point is, the response we've had in recent days shows that there was not the awareness out there in the community, in the current school community, and in the old girls, if you wish. So I think I'm certainly going to be supporting your motion, Councillor Whipper, because it must go back out to the community. There must be a focus on this, that we talk about it with not only the school community, but also with the wider community. So well done, and I'd like to just point out going forward that this is communication really concerns me, and this is a good example where we've shown that other communication worked very well, but a print one didn't.
Thank you, councillor Scandrett. Look, at this stage, I'm going to flag an amendment to councillor Whipper's motion. But I'll ask, do you wish to hear my amendment first, councillor Halstead, or do you?
Yeah, I'm happy. You go whichever way you want.
And my recommendation.
Yes, hear the amendment.
Amendment, that the application be deferred, subject to council facilitating a meeting between council staff and Frensham to explore the possibility of relocating the development to help prevent environmental and habitat impact in the first instance.
Isn't,
That's if I would have taken it.
is that not close to councillor Whipper's motion?
No, in my opinion, it's quite a distance apart.
Well, we can't see it. That's the problem. We can't see.
I will explain my motion, seeing you have asked. If the minute taker can get it up on the screen, please. That the application be deferred, subject to, if we bring it down, council, that subject to a council facilitating a meeting between council representatives and Frensham, exploring the possibilities of relocating the development to minimise environmental and habitat impact. You can leave in the first instance, or that could go right up the top. The application be deferred in, no, leave it the way it is. That's it. So
I'll second that. I'll second that.
Can we have a look at the councillor Whipper's motion again, please?
Yeah, bring it down.
Councillor McLaughlin seconded it. Can we bring it down? Yes. Okay, so I'll leave my amendment there. Do you wish to speak now, councillor Halstead?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm appalled at the proposal that's come up to date, and certainly I'll be supporting councillor Whipper's amendment. Look, no matter where you look in the EPA Act or you look through the values and objectives of the EPA, so we all know what that is, the Environment Protection Authority, the word ecologically sustainable development keeps coming up, and it's embraced within the EPA Act, as the planners would well know. I'm not too sure it's referred to anywhere in the report. It may have been, and I may have overlooked it, but I doubt it. And clearly, parts of the requirement of ecological sustainability is to look at, for example, the precautionary principle, to look at intergenerational equity and conservation of biological diversity and ecological integrity. And irrespective of the report and the fact that it's been allegedly referred to, or apparently referred to, a consultant of some kind to look at it, I have great doubts. And like Larry said, or Councillor Whipper said, it's absolutely amazing to think that such a proposal would be even put forward to placate, obviously, users which are not used to the local environment. That's obvious, and they'd be school children primarily from outside the district, so they'd have a wonderful experience, I'm sure. But I knew before I saw any photographs here this afternoon that in that locality there were certainly platypus way back. I would have no reason to think that there'd be less of them now. And it's quite amazing when you look at the colour of that water there. People have the wrong view on what has to be an environment, if you like, a local environment for platypus. But, you know, it just beggars belief that a proposal like this would be suggested in there at the expense of the local natural environment. And just while I'm on that point, to me, biodiversity values are an absolutely important criteria, and they obviously dealt with in the Biodiversity Conservation Act of 2016, which replaced an earlier act, which was the Conservation Act as such. And it's, you know, talks all about habitat and what have you, and they should be taken seriously. I'd be quite frank, from a point of view of a local person that's been here now quite a lot of years, since 73, I consider myself local, and that's for sure. I'd be devastated if that area that we looked at there today is attacked. And quite frank, I see even the pines, which I don't have the same problem that the mayor has with them, but certainly within that landscape there, the flora habitat there, they form part of the whole scene. Can I say this, that I umpired cricket for a lot of years, and it's got nothing to do with this one, except I never stepped foot onto that piece of land we looked at today to umpire their 10s or 12s.
Thank
I
you.
remember other locations, so I'm not too sure that that is the area that's been that was talked about today that's been used.
Expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. I'm happy to speak to my amendment at this point of time, because there's nothing, and then Councillor McLaughlin, because there's nothing I really oppose to what Councillor Halstead has said. I happen to agree with both he and Councillor Whipper really in relation to this. It's just that I think we are going one step too far too early. The community have sent a fairly loud and clear message, and that is they're not against the proposal, they're against the location. And I happen to agree with that to a large degree as well, noting that every radiata can be taken out without council permission, and probably more and suitable species put in its place. All that besides, looking, and Councillor Whipper has put a lot of thought into his motion, and I'm not going to argue with his motion in that regard, other than that I think we should in the first instance just go back to the school, say we've heard the community have got concerns, council has concerns, can you work with council to relocate in a better ecological environmental area of your site? They might say no, come back, and we decide then to where we go from there, and then so would Frensham School. But in this instance, I think there is no need for the extra pressures that are going to be applied to the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, and all the other areas that will be consulted. So I commend the staff on their report. I think it's a very solid report. And at the end of the day, council will make the decision after further consultation. But I think in the first instance, and as has been pointed out by Councillor Whipper, Frensham have been a very good corporate citizen, and every development they have done has been with taste and with great thought to the location and whatever. And we've supported them as well by putting in the turning bay to get into the synthetic hockey field and swimming pool. So we've worked with Frensham, so I'll just be asking Frensham to have another think and try and work with council. And for one simple thing is that, yes, there may not be any koalas on that site, but we have just heard from the state government the formation of a new national park to try and preserve what is now becoming a very endangered species. And I know over the last couple of weeks, koalas have been seen in the East Barrel precinct. And it would be great that rather than removing koala vegetation, that they be planted. So let's try and work with the school, see what we can do to try and get the compromise between the community and council. Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I agree wholeheartedly. I don't see any way that we should move, as you said, the big step first. It's time just to have a discussion with the school, rather than they've had staff recommend approval. If they wanted to take this somewhere else and fight it, they've probably got a good chance. But I think they would be very open to listening to what the community and what council think about this at this time. We're not against the proposal, as everyone says, but it's the location. Now, we were down there today. We walked 2 minutes from that spot into what Councillor Halstead talked about, the bush pitch. Well, it is a bush pitch, and I don't think it's been used. My understanding, it hasn't been used for years and years. Now, there's an opportunity there, I think, for a location.
We've lost you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Time's up.
Someone tried to call me. Someone tried to call me. Anyway, I'll quickly say, look, I'm not against Councillor Whipper's proposal, but I think in the first instance, we talked to the school. I don't know where that planner was from. She said they use it all the time. I have my doubts, as Councillor House said, how often that has been used to make a perfect opportunity. It's right next to the bush. You could provide all that infrastructure without disturbing anything. You could grow the bush around it and you're virtually in the bush without the destruction. So in the first instance, I think that's where we go, Mr. Mayor. Thanks. Sorry about the phone call.
That's all right. Before we go back to you, Councillor Whipper.
I was going to speak against the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, can I ask somebody, we'll go around and then you can speak against the amendment. But I think Councillor Andrews, are you wishing to speak?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not muted, am I? Initially, I would sort of prefer approval, but I certainly support the amendment. I just don't, in Councillor Whipper's motion, no real problem except with a public meeting. Or a community meeting. I don't believe that's necessary. Therefore, I won't support the motion. Winfred Western Phyllis Club opened Frensham Girls Boarding School in July 1913, using £1,000 borrowed from Miss West's mother. Up until their retirement in 1938, both ladies shrewdly bought up land and buildings to amass the site to what forms Frensham today. Over the past 10 years, students have planted thousands of native trees and shrubs. From the early 1900s, Frensham School has been, and it's been mentioned earlier, a magnificent corporate citizen. Early days, they allowed the old Mittagong RSL to run annual Christmas parties for kids. Annual students' Christmas pageant every year was available to the community. Access to the original old swimming pool to the community on public holidays. The Neon Public School was able to take on carpentry classes at Sturt. In recent times, the access to Club Hall, to the new swimming pool by the water polo. Fairham District Hockey, if you didn't know, Association used Frensham playing fields for competition games over several years. Frensham for many years has been a significant contributor to the economy of Wingecarribee Shire through construction, employment, service trades, permanent and part-time employment, and many benefits to local retailers. Frencham's many developments over the years have always displayed sensitivity to the environment, flora and fauna. You only have to walk around Club Hall to see examples of this. All Frencham's most recent developments are of a high standard, both architecturally and to satisfy amenity. Club Hall, the multi-use indoor sports facility, the new hockey facility, the national swimming pool, and recently the new dining hall. I know most of the objections are focused around biodiversity. I read from the report in regard to the Biodiversity Development Assessment Report, states that vegetation within the 4.2 hectare portion of the property affected by the proposed development has been fragmented, subject to weed invasion, including the loss of some structural layers, and has passed an ongoing disturbances associated with school operations and adjacent residential development. Report further explains that the footprints of the proposed buildings have been located within areas of vegetation which are dominated by exotic species, including a canopy dominated by Pinus radiata, and that impacts to native vegetation associated with the required APZs have also been minimised by strategically identifying trees to be removed and limiting tree removal to exotic canopy species, Pinus radiata, and those canopy native trees proposed to be removed. The report states that 76 native trees are damaged, diseased and declining, that 9 have a high moderate retention value, but their removal is necessary to achieve bushfire asset protection through zone requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Now, Councillor Whipper, I'll allow you to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you're right, Mr. Mayor. In essence, the amendment is similar to the motion, but I think there's one key factor that we need to acknowledge, that there is a jurisdiction by the federal government over environmental issues under the EPBC Act. Now, I can't believe that our consultants just sort of ignored the fact that there is a federal adjudicator over issues like this. It's very convenient to get paid for a job and say, oh, well, I don't really believe that, we've got any responsibility beyond this. But at the end of the day, councillors, each of us have an environmental responsibility. We have an intergenerational responsibility. We have a responsibility to protect that wildlife and the habitat that supports that wildlife. As I said, that area has been disturbed over the 20 years I've been on council and previous to that as well. And those connections, that connectivity of wildlife corridor is being eroded. That's a real concern. Now, there are vegetation types there that do support koalas, and I do believe from locals that, there have been koala sightings there. Our council have a program, Koala Rama, and we've been on the front foot, certainly at a state level, at a national level, promoting our commitment to the preservation of that species. This seems totally inconsistent, and I don't think it's a positive message for us to be sending out. Now, if our consultants believe that there's no value in this habitat, dead and dying trees, councillors, create brilliant habitat for wildlife, and it's something, it's not rubbish. This is where the species thrive and grow, but we just clear it up. I don't think enough people have a real sense of what an ecosystem is and what an environmental ecosystem consists of. I think it's really important, councillors, that we accept our environmental and intergenerational responsibility and call in that independent, that federal adjudicator to give their opinion on this. So, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I think that we need to run that process, because even the amendment just delays the inevitable. Because if we can't get a solution, we'll have to call in I believe the community will have an expectation that the federal government under the EPBC Act are included in this. And if Frensham decide, yes, we can find an appropriate spot so that there'll be no environmental impacts, then we don't have to call on the feds, do we, to get involved? So I think we need to be consistent, councillors, and I don't know why we should fear an independent arbitrator like the federal government coming in and saying this is valuable, and any impacts on this will destroy habitat and connectivity opportunities. So, councillors, there is a distinct difference, and I think an important difference that we need to acknowledge at this point. And if Frensham come to the party and hear what we're saying, not what we're saying, but what the community's expectation is, and they do, and they find another appropriate site, then it's a non-issue anyway.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Nelson and then Councillor Scandon.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think this is an example of a development that complies, but is against the community interest, similar to the Redford Park estate. And if you think that the community at Redford Park estate petition councillors, and what councillors have received in the last 3 days is anything to go by, then Frensham School has little support in the community. Now, Councillor Whipper mentioned, 80 odd. I'd be pushing 100 plus at this stage. And as has been said, all the councillors today visited the site, and for me, I can't vote for approval. Normally I have voted with the staff recommendations, but I can't in this case because of all the ecological community species, the koalas, all the examples that have been discussed already. But because this is a school that can be built in an R2 low density residential zone area, that gives the Frensham School the upper hand, and they could take it to the Land Environment Court and they will get approval hands down. Because as you can see in the report, there's constant approval from all the divisions of council and the relevant agencies. But then conversely, in the report, there's a number of excellent points from the community arguing why development should not go ahead. Now, I put a couple of dot points down listening to the debate, and I thought that maybe we could also write to the Minister for Education or the Minister for Environment seeking their assistance in relation to this. And the other dot point that I put down was risk management, because when we were out there on site today, there's a number of large trees, tall trees out there. And I remember when there was a school excursion and a tree fell down and a student was killed. Now you're going to have 72 young ladies out there, and there's a possibility that one day somewhere a tree will fall in the forest. And I tell you what, there could be dire consequences as a result, and the school would be responsible. I'm looking for compromise in relation to this report, and deferral is the way to go to try and get an expectation. I'm also thinking of biodiversity before profit, and in listening to Councillor Whipper's argument, do you go hard or do you go soft? And I'm actually thinking that you should go hard in this instance because Frensham School do have the upper hand.
Thank you, Councillor Scandon.
Okay.
Councillor Scandon. You're on mute, Councillor Scandon.
I'm not now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking against the amendment, Mr. Mayor. There's a number of things that come to mind here. I question, for example, how this is zoned R2. For example, to me, it's an item of environmental heritage of sorts. Why? Because it's part of our long-standing landscape in that area. We heard earlier from Councillor Andrews, it's some 100 years. Secondly, it's clearly a wildlife corridor and habitat. We talked only recently about Mary Street, not far from there, and other developments there about preserving that corridor through there. And we've identified in this a number of koala feed trees. It's a limited type. I'm wondering whether really it should be an R2 zone. Maybe they've got to start widening this whole matter anyway. I'll just leave that on the table. But of course, it was only earlier this year, councillors, that we unanimously took on board the issues with climate. And here we are looking at an issue where we're going to take out hundreds of trees. There are other sites at the moment that are quite good examples too, which may get some encouragement from an approval on this to equally take a broad axe approach to habitat and endangered shale woodland areas. I can think of one not far away, for example. So I'm not going to support the amendment, Mr. Mayor. I do think that what Councillor Whipper has proposed there covers your bases, and as he says, some of those recommendations may not need to proceed forward, providing that the school listens and particularly listens to its broader community, i.e. the Southern Highlands.
Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Yeah, no, look, if you look at the plan on page 53 of the attachment 4 sheet, you can see how densely populated the trees are now. We can see also that there's 266 trees to retain, but 249 to be removed. That's on page 12 of the report. 85 native trees and 16 koala feeding trees, and 164 radiatas. The radiatas, no problem with, but you also got the native trees, which are obviously for the habitat, no doubt, but also they can be very dangerous over a period of time. We know that. I'm concerned that if you look at page 53, attachment 4, that knowing that the zoning allows for the potential of a subdivision down the path, right along Colo Street, I think it is, by memory. The problem is we probably really need to rezone all that land to something that's more suitable so the habitat doesn't become an issue down in the future, which I'm sure Councillor Whipper would recommend as well. So I support Councillor Whipper's recommendation. And the reason is because we seem to be lacking in going to the community on major developments. And this is a major development. And why would we be scared or hesitant in asking the community to what they thought of what's going on? Admittedly, it's not their land, but it is their backyard. And so I find no problem at all in allowing Councillor Whipper's motion to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Whipper, I think you now can speak 3 times. You've spoken for, against, and now you can sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's been an interesting debate, and I think there's a commonality among all councillors, and that is that we do have a concern for our environment. The Climate Change Committee has been spoken of earlier. Our commitment to that, I think, is obvious. And part and parcel with our councillors is the fact that, we really do need to value our local environment, and particularly our diminishing ecological communities. These are critically important areas that we need to maintain, not only, for the satisfaction of knowing that we've done something useful for future generations, but to preserve and protect those animals that are dependent on those small islands and corridors that they live in. These are the only forms of sanctuary that they have. And my concern is that slowly, incrementally, they're diminishing. And if we isolate and break down those corridors, what happens is they become islands where animals become stranded, and they just degenerate in those small pockets of the environment without any opportunity to actually flourish and migrate. I think that's a real concern, councillors. The other concern that I have is that this hasn't been, we haven't involved Council's Environment and Sustainability Department in this decision-making process. It's all been from a planning perspective. There's been no environmental input from our own community or our own council, apart from some external consultant. Now, I think that's a flaw in democracy, in the process, and I think we need to correct that. Councillors, we're the local custodians of this area, and I think as people that have been elected to protect this area, it really is incumbent on us to send a message out there. So education and learning doesn't only come through school processes, it comes through the process and our values as a community. I think this is very much a learning opportunity for those students of Frensham. What is important? What are the values? You know, we talk about putting in this accommodation so that students can have bushland experiences, but in the same breath, we have asset protection zones, which mean we have to destroy all of that habitat, which just doesn't make sense. So why not leave it in situ, put it somewhere else, and so that students can have the best of both worlds. They can have that natural experience, they can learn to appreciate, protect, and and again, just reforest if they want to do that, which is brilliant, because the responsibility we pass on, councillors, to future generations, it's like a baton. If we're not handing it on, it's not going anywhere. So I'm hoping, councillors, you will support this. If we can negotiate and the community can convince Frensham as a responsible corporate citizen to become involved, then the feds won't get involved at all.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. So if we can put the amendment back up on the motion on the door, please. Okay, so the amendment, we'll put the amendment first. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Councillor Andrews, McLaughlin and Gare. Those against? Councillors Nelson, Whipper, Halstead, Turland and Scandrick. I declare the amendment lost. The motion is there. I'll now put the motion. All in favour of the motion. Councillor Nelson, Whipper, who's that? Do you want it?
Halstead.
Scandrick, and Turland. Those against? Councillors Gare and Andrews. I declare the motion carried. We now move to 11.1, 2019-20 annual financial statements. Somebody like to move that? Councillor McLaughlin, second by Nelson. Is there any discussion? And I put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. We move to page 61, request to name cricket grounds at Centennial. Now, we do not have a recommendation. Do you wish a introduction from council staff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I'll hand over through the acting general manager to Mr. Stace Lua.
Thank you,
Mr. Lua.
Afternoon, everyone. Through the chair. The report seeks council's determination on the request from the Barrel Blues Club to name the oval within Centennial Park Barrel after long-time member Mr. Brian Martin. The club make the request both to honour Mr. Brian Martin's contribution to cricket and also the upkeep and development of the cricket oval within Centennial Park. The club have provided 75 letters of support and note 2 objections. Council has undertaken significant research after receiving the request and have consulted with the Geographical Names Board, who is the authority within New South Wales for place naming. The Geographical Names Board have a current policy which was adopted in 2019. A notable clause within that policy is 7.1, which is personal names. Using the name of a living person is unacceptable internationally and nationally, as it may lead to favouritism and or inappropriate naming. There are examples within the Shire, such as David's Woods playing field, which do not align with that specific clause. The Geographical Names Board have indicated that that particular clause was not in previous versions of their policy. The Geographical Names Board has also confirmed that council can make the determination under clause 9.10 of their policy, which is naming of facilities within reserves. Facilities within an officially assigned reserve, such as a pavilion, grandstand, garden, etc., may also be named according to this policy, but do not require formal approval by the GNB. Therefore, council can make the determination themselves. It does not need to be referred to the Geographical Names Board for determination. Thank you.
Okay, any questions to Mr. Lua? Councillor Howstead, then Councillor Turl.
No, I was going to move a motion, so
Okay,
I'll
right.
leave it till afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor Howstead. Questions, Councillor Turl?
Yeah, just to recap what you said, we do not have to go to the Geographic Names Board. It can be dealt by council. Yes?
Correct, under clause 9.10, which is naming of a facility within an existing reserve.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Then I'll give it to Councillor Howstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move option 3.
I'll second
no
that.
compunction in moving that one at all. Can I
I'll
speak
second
to it briefly, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we can put seconded by Councillor Turl, and we can put option 3 up. I'll read it. The council approved the request from the Barrel Blues Cricket Club to name the cricket grounds at Centennial Park, Brian Martin Oval. Moved by Councillor Howstead, seconded by Councillor Turl. Councillor Howstead, do you wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, there's a common phrase used, no brainer. This is one of them. This is an absolute classic case of something that should be supported strongly. The community supported. The cricketers overwhelmingly supported. I know there was one objector at one stage, but seems to have disappeared off the scene, which is good. But this man, quite frank, I'd rank directly behind David Wood. So if you've got some idea of how I hold him in esteem, and I'm sure a number of you people there do, in terms of commitment to sport, and I'll talk about cricket now, I'll get away from the others, because we've got Councillor Andrews sitting there, who's obviously involved in rugby league, etc. But David Wood, for example, unbelievable commitment to cricket. Well, I rank this guy, Martin, next in terms of commitment to cricket in the district. Now, I had a big involvement, a long-term involvement, as you're probably aware, in cricket, so I know what I'm on about in terms of the history. And his track record has already been alluded to earlier tonight, and quite frank, I don't think a lot more needs to be said, but it's absolutely paramount that we get on with this, do it. We may go down the line, and probably will go down the line of the policy, but it should not have any way interfered with this, and I'm quite appalled that it ever did, but that's happened, and we're back to the point now where we can deal with this as it should have been. And I have great admiration for this individual as the talent involved. I mean, you've heard the history already. It's unbelievable, but you can well and truly name an oval within a park. And I'm quite frank, contemplating something similar at Lackey Park. You can have an oval in the name of somebody, as distinct from Lackey Park being the overall complex. So I'm well aware of what went down with the Centennial Avenue. And quite frank, Barrel Blues did not have a location for its cricket activities for many years until that was undertaken as a project. And this man contributed, along with many others, to get that up and running. But I can't speak more highly of anybody in the game of cricket other than David Wood, who I'm a great fan of, and his commitment's unbelievable. But this man is number 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howstead. I would say that is a very strong endorsement. Councillor Nelson. You're muted, Councillor Nelson.
I'd just like to go back to the speaker earlier tonight and just say that I don't believe that there was anything underhand about the policy and the issue of the naming request. So the way things develop in council, you can have the mayor bringing forward some items for discussion as a result of community input, and the staff doing something else, because we had an existing policy. The staff were probably only updating the policy as a result of the geographical boards updating their policy. So there's nothing there to worry about. I am a little concerned about the naming, making a second name within a name, calling an oval. There's an issue there for emergency call outs. So I hope that this is a one-off and that we don't go around naming every other oval in the Shire. So I think that's the other concern I have. So, but I'm happy to support option 3. I was taken back by the amount of support that came forward, and for that reason, I'm happy to support it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Any other speakers? Councillor Scandrett, Andrews and Turlett. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm not wanting to cast any shadow here over Mr. Martin, but I am worried the fact that we haven't locked down our policy on this, and that this may lead to a avalanche of applications. I do note Councillor Nelson's point about name clarity for emergency purposes, and in ovals, the case of ovals, it's absolutely essential that it's quite clear because of helicopter and the like in evacuation times. So I'll be voting against this, not against the proposed recipient, but just because the timing really should sit behind the policy and all of our strategies there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, as Councillor Halstead mentioned, know of the gentleman, and he certainly has served cricket sensationally. Close to 30 years is some achievement. I won't support this, and I'll tell you why. Barrel Cricket Club, by the way, opposed it, as did the Highlands Cricket Association. Now, as a sports administrator, without that support, I would struggle to support any application in regard to this matter. They do make it very clear as one of their points why they wouldn't support it was that an Augustus Niche, or the Niche family, gifted this property to the community of Wingecarribee many years ago. They believe it would be more appropriately named after that family. Now, this does, by just presenting that, possibly open a Pandora's box, because if this is thrown up, it would certainly, in my opinion, be given priority, given the nature of the gift and the fact that these people gifted this property or this land to the Shire at the time, many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Turlett. You muted yourself, Councillor Turlett.
Augusta Niche did donate this land in the early 1900s, and I'm told by Rodney Cavalier he had 27 or 25 children. So this man was a very active man, not just in cricket, but in lots of other ways as well. He also, apparently some of his children were related to the late Don Bradman in some form. This is what Mr. Rodney Cavalier, historian, has educated me over the last few weeks. I think, and probably not right now, but maybe in the future, we put a motion forward that we change the name of Centennial Park to the Niche Park, with the Brian Martin Oval inside the Niche Park, because I don't know when Centennial Park ever got named after the road, but one would think we should go back to the person who actually donated the land back in the 1900s. Another area is that we have Bradman Oval in the area there, but Venables Park, the Venables actually donated that land before my time, people that were born in Barrel, but we've changed, that park has also been changed to Bradman Oval in that area, where it should have been Venables Park with Bradman Oval inside the park. And maybe we should look at changing that park that we have there back to the original people who donated that land. But I think it's not the right time now to put a motion forward to go to the public to change it back to the Niche Park with the Brian Martin Oval inside it. But I think I will be bringing back a motion that we go to the public to see if they're prepared to change the park from Centennial Park to the Niche Park.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to support the recommendation. And Mr. Watson is right. Way back when and way before Christmas, I met with the Barrel Blues in relation to their suggestion. And my belief is that if the sporting club wishes to acknowledge someone who they feel is worthy of recognition, it is not for me so much to make comment. The big thing is that there is unanimous support, and that has been improved over the last 8 months. And it is unfortunate that the naming policy was coming forward within that time frame. If that had have happened back in, we'll say April, when we didn't meet because of COVID, or May, then we wouldn't be even having this style of debate in relation to the naming code, because it wouldn't have been done then. So this application or request was brought forward before that the policy was totally formulated, and as such, I'll be supporting it through that. If it had come and we had adopted the code, well, that would put me in another position, as Councillor Andrews has alluded to, and Councillor Scandrett. The only thing I can say is that there will be, Councillor Nelson, a further request in relation to the request for naming of the new hockey oval over at Welby Heights. There will be a request coming from the Hockey Association, because they have informally named those two areas. So that will come as well. But in support of it, I think the Barrel Blues have shown a commitment and a dedication and a continuation to get this approved. So I commend them on their effort, and also Mr. Martin for his dedication to the Cricket Association and the cricket within the Highlands. Because I was on council, just elected, as Councillor Halstead was, back in '95, and I think the commencement of the upgrading of Centennial Oval was brought forward, and it was virtually a bit of a swamp. And I think council were greatly surprised over the years how that's been transformed. So thank you, Mr. Watson, for bringing it forward, and I congratulate you on your efforts. We have a recommendation as moved by Councillor Halstead. Do you wish for a right to reply, Councillor Halstead?
No, I don't. I think it's pretty straightforward. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I'll put the recommendation as moved by Councillor Halstead and Turlin. All in favour, please put up your greens. Councillors Nelson, Whipper, Halstead, Turlin, and Gare. Those against, Councillors McLaughlin, Andrews and Scandrett. I declare the motion carried. Well done. Now we move over to page 66. 66. Clickety click, and that is the land acquisition of Moss Farm. After a recommendation, we go into close to discuss. Moved by Scandrett.
Second.
And Nelson. Put it. All in favour. Against, carried. 12.1, page 67.
Yeah, happy to move that way.
Move councillors Nelson and McLaughlin. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour. Against, carried. We move to page 12.2, page 84. development applications received. Moved.
Yeah, happy to move that way.
Seconded councillor Nelson. Any discussion?
There's just noting those items there to come to council.
No, I put it. All in favour, please raise your card. Against, carried. We move to draft development control of the plan amendments, engineering specifications, 12.3, page 98. Moved. Councillor Halstead, seconded councillor Turlin. Is there any discussion? Put it. All in favour, those against, carried. Page 102, 12.4, council representatives on advisory committee. Can I suggest, as I said at the, in the first recommendation, we note that, but that all other committees stay in situ for the rest of council's term. So the only committees that will be have a new committee would be member would be the audit risk, community development, demographics and housing, and environment sustainability.
So you want to move number 2 to number 1?
So that is my suggestion. If somebody wishes to move it,
I'll move that, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
Councillor Turlin had his hand up first.
I move that council Scandard be in the position of audit and risk.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Well, shouldn't we? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, you've got to go through them. This is what we're doing, aren't we?
No problem.
I'm happy enough to move councillor Andrews as the alternate now, or the delegate for the audit and risk. But initially, please, can I go back to the question? Are councillors subject to one happy for all councillors to stay in the same position?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That's done. Now we're doing the list.
Yeah.
Yes.
That worded up.
Yeah, it's number 2. Number 2 says that.
2, it covers it there.
Okay, so it's in point 2, okay?
And Mr. Mayor, I don't necessarily want to be chair of the Demographics and Housing Committee, just to qualify that. Thanks.
All right, so we'll go through them one at a time. So at this stage, we will we really can't have a recommendation because we haven't voted on any of the delegates yet. So we'd better get recommendations for the Audit, Risk and Committee. A nomination of councillors Scandrett. You're happy to take that position, councillor Scandrett?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Audit and risk. I've served 6 years on that previously.
Okay, and councillor Andrews is happy to also be nominated. So on that basis, I will put the recommendation as those movers, moved by councillor Turlin and seconded by councillor Whipper.
Councillor Whipper.
Yep.
Councillor Scandrett be the alternate delegate, or the delegate, sorry, and moved by myself and seconded by
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
councillor McLaughlin to be seconded. So you're happy to accept that as well, councillor Andrews? All right. So all those in favour of councillor Scandrett, please raise your hand or your card. Councillor Scandrett, councillor Turlin, councillor Whipper. Are you all voting in favour of councillor Scandrett, councillor McLaughlin?
Yep, I am.
So that is one. How many is that? 4. All those in favour of councillor Andrews, please raise your card. Councillors Nelson, Andrews.
Councillor Halstead hasn't voted yet.
Yeah, he's going to probably vote now.
No, I don't
I'm
know.
abstaining.
Okay.
You can't abstain.
McLaughlin, Councillor McLaughlin,
It's a method.
you have voted twice.
You can't.
I'm going to put the vote again. Councillor McLaughlin, you have voted for Councillor Scandrett and you have voted for Councillor Andrews.
Andrews. Good work. Flip a coin.
One or the other.
Yeah, no. Well, one was chair and one was deputy chair.
No, we're on audit risk and
I'm
improvement.
going to put it again for clarification. All those in favour that Councillor Scandrett be the representative on Audit Risk and Improvement Committee to replace Councillor Markwart, please raise your card. Councillors Whipper, Turlin, Scandrett and McLaughlin. All those, that's fine. All those in favour of Councillor Andrews being the delegate. Councillor Gare, Councillor Nelson and Councillor Andrews. I declare Councillor Scandrett the representative to replace Councillor Markwart. Community Development Committee.
Right.
Who, does anybody wish to be the Community Development Committee?
I know that Councillor McLaughlin has in the past served on that committee, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure if he'd be interested again.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I'd rather go on the Democratic Housing Committee, actually.
Okay, so is there anybody who wishes to go on the Community Development Committee?
I will, Mr Mayor, if you need somebody.
Okay, Councillor Scandrett has put his hand up for that. Is there anybody else? Then I declare Councillor Scandrett as the now delegate for the Community Development Committee. Demographics and Housing Committee, you're putting your hand up, Councillor.
I think Councillor Scandrett should be the chair.
Councillor Turl. You're putting your hand up.
I'm happy to be Councillor Nelson, unless somebody else wants it. Yes, absolutely.
I wouldn't mind doing it, actually. I was on it initially.
Well, come on board, Councillor McLaughlin. I'll support that.
Councillor Turl is also nominating for that position.
Yes, for the chair, yes.
Well, I think I will nominate, we'll get somebody else on. Right, Councillor McLaughlin. So if there's no other nomination for the position vacated by Councillor Markwart, that is Councillor McLaughlin. Who else is on that committee now?
Well, I am Mr Mayor and I'm the deputy chair. I'm quite happy to take the chair if you want me to.
No, I put my name up.
But
Councillor Turland has put his name forward, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay.
Right, so Councillor, how many
Mr Mayor, if I could, Mr Mayor, if I could, I'll step down from that committee. I'm a member of that committee, but I'll step back to create a position for someone else.
Okay, so we have those three people have nominated for that position as being on that committee, Councillors Turland, McLaughlin and Scandrett. There are no other nominations. Then I declare those three elected. Now we will nominate the chair for that committee, and that has been Councillor Turland has nominated himself and Councillor Scandrett has nominated himself.
But I'll happily step back, Mr.
Well, I'll
Mayor.
withdraw as well. I'll withdraw.
No, Councillor Turland is elected, and quite frankly, you don't need three of us there as delegates.
Councillor Turland is elected unopposed to that chair of the Demographics and Housing Committee. Environment and Sustainability Committee.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to invite Councillor Halstead to fill that position if he's interested.
His hand went up straight away. I reckon there's
Oh, okay.
back office dealings here. So is there any other nomination? Then councillor Halstead, you are now a happy member of the Environment. And
Thank you.
Very good. Excellent.
Right. So, that's the way the committees will be now structured. And we will leave the rest. So now I want to move it and second all that recommendation at the top.
I'll move.
Moved Councillor Whitler, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. That those council representatives that have been nominated and filled being.
Where, Mr. Mayor?
Right, that's what you're moving. And number 2.
Can we have a number 3, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Nelson.
I raised the issue before about the Wingecarribee Floodplain Risk Management Committee. And Councillor Turlin used to be the chairman and Councillor Halstead became the chairman and I stayed in as the alternate chair. I'm happy for Councillor Turlin to go on that committee, and he did say it may not meet, but he was the chairman and he does have a lot of experience in relation to floodplain management. So I'd be happy to be an alternate delegate to those 2 councillors, but I do think Councillor Turlin would serve a better, he's got better experience for that committee.
You're stepping back. Councillor Turlin, are you happy to take that position? Yes?
Yep.
Councillor Halstead, have you got your hand?
I just wanted to make a comment that there will definitely be a meeting of that this year, at least 1, maybe 2.
Okay. It's important that.
Thanks, Peter.
Councillor Nelson retires from the floodplain committee and Councillor
I'll be alternate delegate.
Yeah.
is now moving into that position.
If one of them can't go, I'm happy to go.
Okay, so you'll be alternate, Councillor Turlin will be the member. Right.
Yeah.
You and Councillor Turlin's accepted. So as we got that for the records, the answer is yes. So moved by Councillor, can we come back down please? Whipper, and seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. All right.
It's Whipper.
Put it all in favour, against, carry. We now move over to 12.5 draft code of conduct and procedures for the administrative code of conduct. You want?
An introduction, please, Mr. Mayor.
So we will get you want an update?
Yes, please.
Ms. Lingard, please introduce.
Good evening, councillors. Amended versions of the Model Code of Conduct and the procedures for the administration of the Code of Conduct for local councils in New South Wales were prescribed on the 7th of August. So this report provides you with an overview of the key changes and presents the drafts for adoption by council. Councillors, as discussed last week, a number of the amendments were in response to a Supreme Court matter, which is referred to as Cornish. At this matter, the Supreme Court held a council resolution that subjected a councillor to disciplinary measures as invalid because the council did not have the powers under the Local Government Act to discipline the councillor other than censure. So the procedures have been amended to reflect this decision. Other changes include changes to definitions for council committees and council committee members, changes to the grounds of harassment and discrimination, changes for gifts and benefits, changes around the establishment of the Code of Conduct panel, and some of the procedures for investigating Code of Conduct complaints regarding councillors and general managers have changed. And also procedures for reviewing decisions, imposing sanctions have also been changed. Councillors, we do need a decision from you or a resolution from you around one of the amendments to the gifts and benefits. So a change has been made which lifts the $50 cap on gifts up to $100. Councils aren't obliged to lift this cap. It can be at $100 or less. So we will be looking for some direction from you. Otherwise, all the other amendments need to be adopted by council and are effective immediately.
Okay, so council, questions initially. Seeing you, question councillor Scandron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Lidcard, could you just confirm that in the amendments that the limit on gifts that may be accepted could be reduced to zero?
It could be. What the new code of conduct does say, though, is that anything under 10 would be a token gift.
Indeed. And secondly, on page 110, the change in the procedures to appointed panel of code of conduct reviewers, I now believe that's determined by the general manager. And could you advise who our appointed code of conduct reviewers are consequent to the expressions of interest earlier this year, please?
I'll have to take that on notice, councillor. I'll get back to you on that. We've only just recently appointed them, and I don't have.
That's fine. You could put it in the weekly bulletin, Ms. Lidcard.
That'd be irrelevant.
Councillor Scandron, councillor Turl.
Yeah, on page 109, where it says the last part of the report, procedures on reviewing the decisions to implement sanctions. I would put a scenario to you that a reviewer who might have done a report that has taken good money from a council's, whoever that might be, should have picked up that the failure in the code of conduct procedures, that nothing could be done if a number of councillors were part of the code of conduct. So why can a reviewer take money on false pretenses?
I think that's rhetorical. I can answer. Councillor, I don't think staff can really answer that, Councillor Turl. You'd have to ask those who have changed the code. We have been, it's been put to us. We are to implement it, and the only thing that we are not to, we have debate on is the amount, whether it be a 50, a 100 or a $10 cap. That's the only area that we can debate. The other is mandatory, and we should accept it. So do we have a recommendation?
I want to talk on it, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Well,
I want to move a motion, but I'll wait for Councillor Houston.
well, I'm not going to allow any speakers unless we have a motion.
Okay.
Okay, well, here's my motion, Mr. Mayor, and that is that the limit on value of gifts that may be accepted be amended to $0. Nil.
Okay, so that really you say that the draft code of conduct be adopted as you go to the option 1 or 2 on page 112.
Yes, you can do it that way, and you amend that to say by imposing a cap that is 0.
You can't do that, councillor. You can't do it because there is a $10. Anything below $10 is classified as non declarable, and that's
Mr. Mayor, if the general manager confirms that that is the act, then I'll change it to $10.
Well, the advice is that anything below $10 is a token, so that's obviously a strong indication as to what the minimum is. I mean, I've just, a little bit half-heartedly here given the mayor a pen and said, well, I've just given you a gift, Mr. Mayor. you can't accept that because you can't take any value at all. I mean, that's probably a little bit ridiculous.
So I will move a recommendation from the chair as a,
Yeah, I'll second it.
and that is that the amount be as be $50 as existing.
Greg, can Councillor Turlman's going to second, isn't he? Yeah.
Well, on the first bit, I acted a bit quickly because councillor Scandrett's moved it, but did you get a second to councillor Scandrett?
No, I'm looking for one now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Somebody who doesn't feel that we should even accept a cup of coffee.
We don't need any explanation, please, Councillor Scandrett.
I'm asking for a seconder to your recommendation, and it lapses for the want of a seconder. So my amendment now becomes the motion, or I now move a recommendation as option.
All right. Well, I'd like to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so, and it's been seconded by councillor Turner. Councillor Scandrett, you can speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't see any need to have any amount in here, but I was happy with $10. Why? Because we simply just don't need to be in that space. And anyone who has a concern about that, well, you've got the declaration form and so on. You can go through the process, not accept the gift, hand it to the staff, charity, and we give it away each year. So I don't know why we're considering this. On the other matter that was raised there by Councillor Turland, and I had media call me the other day, and this is page 110, everyone, where it says to allow the referral of investigators' reports to the OLG for action under the misconduct provisions of the OLG Act, where the council will not have a quorum to deal with the matter. Well, that's, of course, referring to the code of conduct that was discussed by...
Go away.
I'm in debate, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett, we are debating whether a $50 limit or a $10 limit or a zero limit. That's the debate.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I thought we were debating the report, and I am doing so. The recommendation is that it says that the administration of the code be adopted. That's the main recommendation in there. It's in your motion, no doubt.
Councillor Scandrett, just for clarification, there is no debate. There is no debate. We have been told to adopt this. It is mandatory that we adopt it. The only thing we can debate is the amount.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm disappointed. I'm debating on the recommendation and about the fact that we failed to have a quorum.
Please mute.
Put the motion.
No, I'm going to wait 30 seconds until everybody gets a bit of composure. Please keep mute off.
I don't know what.
Is that 30 seconds?
Thank you, councillors.
Yep, I'd like to speak too before it's finished.
I'm going to speak from the chair, and that is you can only debate the points that are allowed to be debated. You can't introduce other material that can't be debated. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think that it's okay for the amount to remain at $50. In the 4 years I've been on council, I've received one cup of coffee. But I do remember when Councillor Scandrett became Deputy Mayor that he was at the same Chinese restaurant as me with two other guests. So either he's able to pay for the two other guests or they split the bill or something. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't. A cup of coffee is fine by me, and that's the limit. The other issue is that the staff certainly go above and beyond with a number of community members, and community members often go out of their way and want to give a box of chocolates or a bottle of wine, and that exceeds $10. So I'm happy for it to be $50. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And all I know is Councillor Nelson's been right on the money here. We've been operating as a council for 4 years. Has anybody taken a donation of less than $50? Has anybody taken a donation of over $50? Then I do not believe there is a need to alter this at this particular point in time.
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, seeing you ask, I have declared that I went to the inaugural concert of the Symphony Orchestra some years ago because I was given a ticket to that, and other councillors have also. And that does come into this, and I did declare it straight away and filled out the form. But I've always paid ever since then because I want to support the symphony.
Yeah, well, that's good that you did, and I'm not going to criticise you for doing that at all. Okay, so the recommendation's up on the screen. All in favour?
Can we talk to it? Are we allowed to talk to it? Or?
Councillor Halstead, I didn't think anybody else was speaking.
No, I did put my hand up earlier on. Look, I want to talk to it. It clearly got to be supported, and that's obviously, you know, what people are trying to do and ultimately will do. I'm a bit annoyed about the grandstanding going on with one particular councillor because, quite frankly, I haven't taken anything the whole time I've been there, and I'm sure, as you just proved, Mr. Mayor, that probably no other council has either. But they should stay as is rather than, you know, moving forward. But I want to make a few points, and that is that this code of conduct change is totally appropriate. I mean, they've had numerous number of changes over the years, and I know they've got to move with legislative changes and what might happen in the court of law, which it clearly did in the Cornish case. But, you know, we've had a 2015 version, a 2018 version of a model code of conduct, and I have always supported the view that the model code should be the adopted code anyway. Don't know why on earth they go through that procedure of trying to discriminate one from the other. But clearly the December 2018 version was found wanting as a result primarily of the Cornish case, which most of you councillors will be aware of, which was the one related to the councillor at Penrith City. And he had to go to the Supreme Court to bring down what was then fundamental law, common law as a result of that. And they've had to change that. So that's understandable. But some of these other requirements, again, ALG have found it appropriate to bring them in, and I don't disagree with them. But, you know, quite frankly, I think some of it's as a result of them not thinking widely enough in the earlier version, which is unfortunate, 2018. No, you can't combat a court case that's going to come along. But what really worried me is that, you know, they didn't sort of cater for the situation where a complainant or a number of complainants could be the majority of council. So that one didn't come to their consideration earlier on. And of course, that can have devastating effects in that decision can't be made by the council. So they've rectified that. That's great. The one I'm really worried about is that, and I just don't know why on earth they would have done it, is the situation where conduct reviewers can be appointed by the council general manager. That really worries me. I think that opens it up to a great debate as to the integrity of that one. That's my personal view, but they've seen fit to do otherwise. The other matters there I don't wish to comment on as such, other than to say that what they've done has been as a result of problems they've had in their own 2018 version. And it's easy to say things in hindsight, I realise that, but I think there's a couple of fundamental areas they had in that one. The other one was that in the 2018 version, in the case where, for example, a majority of complainants or the number of complainants were the majority of council, they didn't have a provision within the model code of conduct that allowed them to then have the matter referred to them as one of the 3 or 4 they've listed there. So I presume they've now fixed that up. In other words, there were only a number of things of major consequence that could be referred to OLG for decision making. But generally speaking, what I'm saying is that what they've done is appropriate in regard to what's occurred.
Thank you. All right, now, is there any other speaker in relation to it?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'm just going to let you know that you allowed Councillor Halstead to speak quite properly, as he did, on that matter, the quorum issue, and you gagged me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Against, carried. Now we move to 12.6, delegates and motions to the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference. Now,
I wanted to be recorded, Mr Mayor.
you can have recorded that your vote be dissented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegates and motions from the Local Government Conference, page 113. So we have two parts to this recommendation. One is the delegates and two is the motions that have been received on page 114. So I will go for the first. I won't ask for a mover and seconder as yet, but I would like to know who may wish to go for the go to the conference, which will be held under Zoom.
Mr Mayor, could we just have a brief introduction on the conference format? Will it be 2 or 3 days?
It's hang on, no, it's not in there as such. I'll ask Ms. Lingard to give a. We are very much in the dark as well at this stage. Other than that, it is under Zoom. I was speaking to Linda Scott, who rang me last Thursday, and they are still, I don't say, they're still learning on how they're going to run it, I think. But Mr. Pepping has a little bit of knowledge. Mr. Pepping.
So, councillors, the circular that came out from the Office of Local Government included a 15-minute presentation by the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, the Opposition Leader, as well as the Greens Leader. And then there was another presentation leading up until about 1:30, and 1:30 onwards till about 4:30 was designated as conference matters, which in other words is any notices of motions that are received. But normally notices of motion at the conference would be in excess of 100, which usually takes at least 3 sessions and sometimes 4 to get through. So they're only scheduling one day, which is a Monday, and I think it's the 23rd of November. So there'll be presentations, guest speakers up until 1:30, and then after that it would be conference business if required.
So it's going to be a fairly short, it's a one day. Whoever it is will have to allow basically a day to zoom in and zoom out, or however it's going to be run at this stage.
Yeah, I'll be happy, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Nelson, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Scandrett. So you'll be at home and you'll be zooming in under your conditions that you are. So make sure that you've got a good backdrop for the conference. So councillors Nelson, McLaughlin and Scandrett. Okay.
It couldn't be done at the chamber, Mr Mayor.
Well, we'll just see. It's a bit way away yet. So it's now.
All right, we'll sort that out.
You'd be able to come in here if there's only 4 people in here without any worries, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 6 in here now.
Here's dress code for that.
So that's all right. Okay, so you 3 are happy to do that? Right.
Yes.
Now, the other part is the motions that are to be submitted, and the only ones received are on page 114.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes?
look, I foreshadowed that I was going to send one through, which I have done. I've sent that through to Mr. Wilton and also to Miss Williams.
Okay, can you tell me what it is?
Wait there.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll go up.
It'll go up, yeah.
So if you see them, the councillors serve a maximum of 3 current terms. That would get rid of a few councillors. The councillors be elected on first past the post. And I don't think we can do that.
So,
And that councils can self-determine, utilise a directly elected mayor election for 21.
and Councillor McLaughlin's Councillor McLaughlin's proposed motion is threats to residential amenity, heritage areas from uses such as seniors housing, aged care facilities, health service facilities, boarding houses, and the new 2020 low-rise housing diversity code.
I'm happy to speak to that, Mr. Mayor, if I can, just to explain a bit more.
Well, let's go through the first. So if you have a look at A, the council will serve a maximum of 3 concurrent terms to ensure, well, that's it. Just,
I'm happy to speak to that, Mr. Mayor.
okay, councillor Scandrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last term, the then Premier, Mike Baird, surveyed council. Those councillors from last term would recall this. And we, in fact, said that we would support, the majority said, a maximum of 3 terms. And the reason I am speaking to this is because we've constantly talked about wanting to get younger people, women, Indigenous people onto council. And the way to do that is to have some turnover in the ranks, if you wish. To do that, 3 terms was the number we supported. Mr. Pepping confirmed with me that a motion like this has gone up some years ago to the local government conference. So I think it's timely to test it again and put it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder, which I have.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I move Councillor Nelson and,
Yeah, but
and seconded Councillor Scandrick, but we haven't voted. We have done the first 3. But until I'm going to do this in seriatim, so they then become overall part of the final recommendation. Councillor Nelson.
Good, Mr. Mayor, though. Yeah, look, I did flag earlier about I would like to resurrect the motion from this council in regard to additional funding for all libraries in New South Wales. Now, we've put it up previously, so I'd just like to ensure that that one goes forward as well.
I'll second that.
I'll second that. Oh, okay.
Okay, now.
Well, just add it.
Yeah, now look, what we've got 3 recommendations that we're either going to support or we're not going to support at this stage. So let's do the 3 that have been submitted on the business page. Then we'll deal with Councillor McLaughlin. Then we'll deal with Councillor Nelson as I come in. So the council will serve a maximum of 3 concurrent terms. Whoever, if we support this, we're going to have to support it as a council. And those councillors who are on there will have to speak in support, because we'll be the lead speakers.
Can we support that? Oh, yeah, doesn't matter. Yeah.
No, I don't support it. I'm sorry.
I don't.
But
I
I'm
don't.
not,
Put the vote.
I support that.
Put it to the vote.
So I think at this stage, we will vote on the A, the council will serve a maximum of 3 concurrent terms. All in favour of that, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrick, Turland and Halstead. Those against? Councillors Nelson, Whipper, Gare, Andrews and McLaughlin. I declare that one lost.
Could I just check there, Councillor Nelson, you moved it.
So
No.
what?
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm just checking that.
No, what
Oh,
you're doing is asking for a move and second of the recommendation. Then we are voting for
I understand. Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
what will go up, and then it will be as determined by council. So A is out. B, the councils be elected on a first post basis to remove a preference deal.
I'll move that, Mr. Mayor.
Sandra, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Well, of course, councillors, again, this was one of the matters that was tested previously, again, to, as the motion says there, to remove preference deals, because it's about first preference votes. And Mr. Mayor, of course, your first preference votes in the last election put you way ahead of the whole field. First past the post, you streaked it in. And that's, of course, a key point here is that if you've got that support in the community, right, a first past the post deal is the way to go. But of course, at the other end of the scale, you've always got preferences that elect people who otherwise didn't have the primary votes. So that's why I've put this back up. It was previously discussed. And of course, it does tie in with to a point with the following one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Just a question on that. I think the voting method is not up to us to determine. It's the state government dictates that. Am I correct?
Well, it's under legislation, but I suppose if there is a strong enough push, then the legislation can be changed. But at this stage, it is legislated that it is preferential voting. Any other speakers? Councillor Turland?
Yep, I'll speak.
Yes, I've got you, Councillor Mills.
I would think also in item 2, preferential votes should be removed, but I also think that there should be no party politics involved in it, but also it should all be below the line. That's where it should be. Not just getting a group of people who get 5 votes and then become councillors. It's ridiculous. And, you know, we shouldn't have a Labor or Liberal on the Greens because people get voted just because it's the Labor, Liberal or Greens, not to do with the person, which should be what councillors are voted in for, not the so-called political lines that they supposedly sit on. And there's been faults of that before in the last few years, as we know. So with the mover of that motion, Councillor Scandrett, I don't know if you would add to your item D. I can't see.
Councillor, could I suggest, for simplicity, we're going to add 2 more after this on libraries and Councillor McLaughlin's. Why don't you add that in there?
Councillor Scandrett, Councillor Turland has asked whether you would include.
Yes, and I gently said no by suggesting he put it up as item F.
There is no, Councillor Turland.
But
Okay, I'll put it up again.
I will support it, Councillor Turland, if it's separate.
Thank you, Councillor. Then that can be debated. Councillor Nelson, then to you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, Councillor Scandrett may well be right in what he's saying, but the practicalities are our council would be laughed out of the conference. So the major parties have got it so that the way they want it sorted for election, and nothing will change that. So I'll be voting against that one.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
I was wondering if Councillor Scandrett might add that developers and real estate agents be prevented from running from local government as well.
And Councillor, we've had that discussion before, and it's also was part of the Mike Baird questions. I'd say that would be a separate one again.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, just very simple. It's got nothing to do with party politics whatsoever. But I've fundamentally all my life viewed the first past the post as a good voting pattern. In fact, if you look at what happened in England, or what happens full stop in England, you get the same result effectively. But New Zealand was the same for many years. Look, it's got nothing to do with party politics whatsoever, but I've always gone along with first past the post. So that's why I'm supporting it this time.
Right, thank you. Is there any other speaker?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just summing up on that one. Of course, this is about, we just talked about no party politics and so on, but this is about the right of an independent, which a fair number of us are, and certainly across the state there are many independents, to run without fear or favour and to get a true result rather than a preference result. So that's why I've put it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So all in favour of number 2, that councils be elected on a first past the post basis to remove preference votes, please put up your green card. Councillor, Whipper, Halstead, Scandrett, Andrews, Turlin, and you can throw me in there as well, Councillor Gare. So that one's carried. So that becomes one of the recommendations. Number 3, the councils can self-determine without a poll to utilise a directly elected mayor election for 2021.
I'd like to move that, Mr. Mayor, and speak to it.
Look, we're not moving it, but you can speak to it. But I think the legislation says that you have to have you can't do it the way you want to do it. But anyway, you can speak to it.
Mr. Mayor, as I understand it, it is correct the way it's written there, because what we're asking in this would be a variation to the existing rules. It's not to say that the rule exists. And that is, the best example is Wallandilly, that had a poll last election, and the result of that means they'll be having a directly elected mayor next year. Now, had we done the same, for example, as I mentioned before, you won the poll, the 2016 poll. You would streak through as directly elected mayor. People have called it before popularly elected mayor, and I've rephrased that here quite carefully. So it's to show that it's about being directly elected by the electorate, by the ratepayers and residents, simply on again, first past the post. But it doesn't preclude people standing for both being a councillor and for also to be the mayor, because obviously if they're successful as the mayor, they are a councillor, or if they're not successful as the mayor, they still can become a councillor. It's simply about having a open and transparent system, and again, it's first past the post, getting rid of preference deals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Any other speaker? No? Then I'll put the recommendation as moved by, spoken to by Councillor Scandrett, the councils can self-determine. Okay, can we just, all those in favour of that, please put your hand up. Councillors Scandrett and Nelson, all those opposed. Councillors Whipper, Gare, Halstead, Andrews and Turlin.
And McLaughlin.
We now move to Councillor McLaughlin's. Can we put Councillor McLaughlin's up, please? Now, it's not a motion at this stage, Councillor. We'll discuss it, then it will just go into the mix. Okay, so Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll just speak to this briefly. Basically, we know there's a moratorium in Sydney at the moment to prevent and to protect a lot of heritage and residential areas, and what we're finding. But Winter Carriby Shire has 3 residential zones there: R2, R3, medium density, and R5. In the In the past, low density residential areas were assumed to be just that, low density. The character was normally taken to be single houses on their own blocks surrounded by a garden. This is no longer the case, and hence the potential threat for a variation of permissible uses. The central issue is that medium density housing is a guise of seniors housing, aged care facilities, healthcare facilities, boarding houses, and the new 2020 low-rise housing density code. Houses are permissible across all residential zones and all heritage and conservation areas in the Shire. So it's all up for grabs. There is nothing wrong there's nothing wrong intrinsically wrong with any of these land uses, but the unbridled permissibility in all residential areas can mean the loss of residential amenity and loss of heritage value. It's not just a matter that concerns Windsor Carriby. This concerns a lot of shires, in particular Hornsby Council. And now we know that the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces needs to be aware of this, because in the Sydney area, they have put a moratorium on these types of development in residential area. So I think it's something that, you know, a lot of councils can take on board and the Minister can have a look at, because it will really impact on the average person in the street and the average residential area. So that's what I'm putting it forward, and I think it's one that's worthwhile, because what we're seeing down here, Mr. Mayor, as I said, was developers stalking our shire to develop where they can't develop in Sydney because of this moratorium. We're getting that development down here. And I think it's a concern with boarding houses. They're fine. They work fine in Sydney. They work fine in a lot of areas, but we know there's no parking allowed. That they're put in areas where you haven't got the infrastructures they have in the cities and towns. We're still a rural area, and this is right across the board, and we'll see a devastation in our villages and our towns. And I ask councillors, please support it.
Could we see the words, please?
Yes, please put it up. Okay. Any other speakers to it? Councillor McLaughlin, I hear the passion in your voice. You are very, very much opposed to it. Council, the state planning department would have to change state legislation. And wait a minute.
Yep.
It may happen on the next council, next government. It's not going to happen on this one. You may be wise to reconsider and get it put up when maybe there's change of government, because it's just not going to happen. Councillor Turtle.
Yeah, look, we all know it's an LEP, local environmental plan guidelines, is the platform that what can and cannot be done. And so I find it interesting that Councillor McLaughlin is against the so-called developers of the world, but the developers of the world are basically what gives you a house to live in, Councillor McLaughlin, and other people, let alone jobs for what people need within the whole of New South Wales and Australia. At the moment, you have the Premier saying we need to fast track certain different projects and developments to actually help the country and the world get out of where we are in this pandemic. And here we are, we're tying ourselves back in knots with this motion that we won't do anything, do nothing, stop, put your hands on your head and just put it aside forever and a day. This will not get up. It will not get up when it goes to the state conference. The government will not approve it. It just won't happen. And maybe that is what you should be looking at, is the future for our children and how they're going to survive through the pandemic we're in at the moment. Remember, we're actually in a recession now. and we're going to change the environment to stop growth, stop jobs. The only way that this whole country, let alone the world's going to get out of it, is with people taking gambles to move forward to try and make things stimulate the economy. And the building industry is one of those. And where did the building industry start from? Exactly as the planning proposals that are in place by the LEP standards. Extraordinary, but expected as well from a Labor voter.
Spoken like a true developer.
Okay, come on, please, councillor Scandon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And look, we've had some of these battles in this shire, obviously Orchard Street and Colarvale, out of character, so on, very strong community reaction. Leopold in Mittagong, and of course now we've got one coming in at Louisa Street in Mittagong. So the zones, I think Councillor McLaughlin's on the money here. You know, we're not saying no development here, Councillor Turner. We're just saying not in amenity in an area that already has an existing amenity, which is going to be substantially changed. And I get that, and it's a good heritage point too, Councillor McLaughlin. Because the street heritage, particularly Mittagong, for example, those streets in there, the Royal Streets and so on, very much a type of amenity, very well treed and all of that. So in appropriate areas, I mean, for example, I didn't have any problem with the boarding house in Walker Street in Barrel because it was mostly already commercial. And were there proposals in other commercial adjunct areas? But when they're in low density residential and they change the character, I think you're on the money. And look, Mr. Mayor, I don't quite agree with you. I think we must make these positions through our association. That's why we spend $40,000 a year to send the message to government. And if they get enough nods in the room, I think there are a lot of councils around Sydney who want affordable accommodation, but not in low density amenity areas, particularly as we just said, heritage style ones. And heritage doesn't have to be federation, it just has to be a character statement. And I know Councillor Whipper will be very strong on neighbourhood character statements because we've pushed on about that. We didn't get up on that, still waiting for that, but that would have presented some hurdles in some of the areas that these have been proposed. So yes, I support this.
Thank you very much, councillor Scandron. And I just note that I wanted the funding, how councils get funding to be reviewed. We took it to the conference, it got passed, and 12 months later, it's gone nowhere.
Never say no, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
Never
you.
say no.
In favour of councillor McLaughlin's motion that he wants to put up, please raise your hand. Councillor Nelson, Whipper, Halstead, McLaughlin and Scandron. Those against? Councillors Gare, Turland and Andrews. Well won, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so the final one has been put up by Councillor Nelson, that councils ask for more funding. That's basically what you're asking for.
Yes, we previously put it up, so it needs to go up again, Mr. Mayor.
Right, well, it'll be worded, we'll get the staff, if it gets up, to word it so it has more depth than just what you're saying, if that's in order with you.
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we've got that. Is there any debate on Councillor Nelson's suggestion? Then I put that one. All in favour, please raise your. Look at that. You're the only one who got a unanimous, Councillor.
Everyone loves a library.
Everybody did well. That's right.
Whether they use it or not.
Education.
Okay, so
Mr. Mayor, what about those other matters?
the other matters are all. What other matters?
Councillor Turner.
I foreshadowed, as I said.
All right. Yes, you can put it up. What is yours? That there is.
No party politics. No party politics.
Okay.
all candidates to be below the line.
Mm.
Or above the line.
Above the line, whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
They'll all be above the line if there's no party politics.
That's right.
I think you're saying no groups, aren't you, Councillor Todd?
Yeah, no groups,
Well, therefore,
individuals.
it is below the line.
Well, look, one will be, may be possible, and as Councillor Nelson said, it's, you won't get the parties to agree with you, but,
Can I speak? I'll speak to that once we get this up.
Yeah, no, we don't need a second up at this stage. You're just going to put it up as your suggestion, so away you go.
Okay, now what I will say to this is quite simple. When you have party politics involved, you have corruption. Because you have parties that are actually funded by so-called people outside.
Can I ask you to rephrase that there could be corruption?
Okay, could be, but ICAC has already been through quite a few of the issues of party politics in the last probably 20 years. And it's quite clear that when you involve party politics, you actually get games played by different processes, and that shouldn't be like that. People should be voted in as who they are individually, not on so-called the tag of what they believe is a so-called philosophy. And as you can see, the majority of council laws in our council aren't party politics. There is only the Labor Party and the Greens. Councillor Whip has always stood by himself on his own beliefs. So is Councillor Halstead. And I'll go through who else is there. Councillor Scan as always, and maybe I've tagged on the side of the Liberal Party, but I'm thank God I'm not part of the Liberal Party, never have been. So
Liberal leadings.
Okay, councillors, come on. Councillor Turley.
So if you're going to put up to become a councillor, it should be below the line, not above the line, not as a group, and no party politics. It's the only way to get the true involvement of people who want to stand for the community in their area.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's interesting, as I mentioned previously, we didn't have any candidates from the Liberal Party in the last election, and I'm not sure that we will have any in the one next year. So already there would seem to be a moving away by some Liberal Party branches in this shire and others from being involved in local government. Now, local government's always been a training ground for federal and state candidates, in fact MPs, but there's been a change in that space too, and that is that a lot of them now just seem to come through the ranks of the administration for MPs and so on. So Councillor Turner's on the money here in terms of trying to decomplicate the whole process so that it's simply on merit-based. That's what you're talking about, Councillor Turner. Merit-based, no party politics, no advantages, no preferences, no big cash budgets coming through, and you've got to recruit your own workers and from your friends and supporters. So yes, I support it.
Okay, any other?
Are we allowed to speak against it?
Well, we can do both, and so we'll go Councillor McLaughlin, then Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, with regard to a lot of people in this community, they don't follow council, but they might have an allegiance to a certain philosophy, whether that be small business and the Liberal side, or whether that be a Green supporter. They move into an area down here, they won't know who necessarily to vote for, but they've got an idea what different brands of politics stand for. So, I would like to think that, people that vote for a Labor person in council, like my predecessor, Phil Yeo, who was there for 25 years, a man that introduced so many social reforms into this council, introduced things like, why don't we have some childcare? Why don't we look at raising the Aboriginal flag? All these things that he put in place as a Labor councillor. Now, on the same side, you had Peter Reynolds, who was president of the Liberal Party, didn't run as a Liberal person, but he ran as at a state government level. He got support, whether he stood as a Liberal person or not. He was supported for many years. So people do have an affinity for what they think a certain party stands for. Now, whether that be Greens, the National Party, the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, why can't they put someone up that represents those policies and those beliefs that the community want to support? In other words, standing individually is fine if you've got a profile, if you've got a presence. But if you've got 50,000 people in a shire that want to vote, they won't really know individuals unless you're Graham Day or someone else that's out there, on social media all the time, or someone that's got a following. Then you can run as a popularly elected mayor or what have you. But in the meantime, the rank and file of people across this shire that aren't council followers will just go along and say, well, I usually vote Liberal, so if there's a Liberal candidate, they'll vote for them. And that's the way and I don't think it'll get up at a state conference, because it's not the way our society works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin in part was correct. This point D would alleviate the problem where individuals who haven't a clue and can't get in and out of the polling booth quick enough wouldn't have a clue who the individual is and just grab the red or the green or the blue and away they go. Now that's not good for the shire. I just make the point this point D would significantly save a lot of money, cut costs dramatically.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any other speakers?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, look, the Electoral Commission couldn't support it. I understand that below the line is a good concept, but they brought in above the line for speed and efficiency to get the election done. And really, there's no way this would get up at the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Look, just as a philosophical point of view, I'm going to support this. It won't get up, I recognise that, but I have, and although Councillor McLaughlin has been a very good representative for his party, and luckily they picked a decent candidate to run for the Labor Party. But I've also known councillors who have run under a political banner and they've been absolutely hopeless. So as much as I don't believe it'll get up, I'll philosophically agree with it, because it's on your merits and not on party politics. But anyway, so that is Councillor, the one that from Councillor Turland. All in favour of Councillor Turland's suggestion? Councillors Gare, Andrews, Halstead, Scandrett and Turland. Those against? Councillors Whipper, Nelson and McLaughlin. I declare it carried, so that one will become number D. Now, is there any more? Now, remembering, councillors, you're going to have to speak to all these, so you're going to have to get your debating skills up. You've got a stake to take on, not just your fellow councillors.
I'll find it hard to speak to
it. All right, so that's the will of council. We have a recommendation as moved by councillors Nelson, Councillor Scandrett, and who's going to second that? The whole, no, didn't we have a?
Yeah, we had it up. I was in there.
Councillor Nelson, who?
I don't know, Michelle, I can't remember, because I didn't, I was.
Just make a scan.
I moved it, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nelson and then Councillor Scandrett.
And seconded Councillor Scandrett. I remember Councillor Nelson moved it. Seconded,
Yep,
all in
that's
favour of recommendations and suggestions in there, raise your cards. I think that one's carried unanimously. Thank you. We're moving on to petition for Redford Park.
I'd like to move a motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that a report be forwarded to council
It's just coming up, councillor.
requesting,
Hang on, wait a minute, it's coming up on the screen.
oh, we've got it, have we?
Yeah,
Thanks.
just-
I wasn't sure.
Councillor Nelson, I'm looking forward to seconding this.
Okay, we're having a little bit of trouble getting it up.
Yes, seconding that, thank you.
Thank you. Now,
So you got to
The-
do number 1 and then number 2.
can,
So that's number 2.
okay, can you?
Speak to it, Peter.
Yeah,
Speak to it, Councillor Nelson.
look, Mr Mayor, this relates to the Redford Park estate. It's all about the corner blocks, all about the rescission motion that came to council that was defeated. I actually changed my vote to support the rescission motion so that the matter would go to the Land Environment Court because of the legal report that Redford Estate obtained. And I believe that it should have been fought out there. Council then decided otherwise. I think council should support the residents. There's 110 of them that have signed a petition here to stop any further corner blocks or further subdivisions that allow corner blocks to have two houses on it. I do remember having that discussion with the neighbour next door who was overwhelmed by the fact that she now has to have a development right next door to her. And she came down here to the Highlands to have the benefit of the country living. Also, the other issue there is that the residents there have all signed this petition supporting that we change the amendment. It's only for Redford Park. It's not for the rest of the Shire. The report can come forward to council for further debate, and I think that this should be supported by all the councillors. So thanks, Mr Mayor.
Okay, just before we go any further, we'll get it up on the board. Okay. Now, can I ask a question of you, Councillor Nelson? Who have you spoken to in staff in relation to this? Councillor NXP? Okay, I've got the nod from Mr Pepping.
Mr Pepping, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so is there any other speakers on this? Then if you haven't got any speakers, Halstead, Councillor.
Thank you. Look, I agree with it totally. It's pretty clear that the people that live in that area there were misled, in effect. The big problem, as Peter said, it's all about the corner blocks, and that applies right across the Shire, which I have great disagreement with, and we'll be happy to move something in that later on. But clearly, at the time that council dealt with it, had to deal with it as in terms of in accordance with the law, which was what was in the LEP. And clearly, clause 7.2 of the LEP allowed these corner blocks to be subdivided, which is a travesty, really. But all I can say is it's clear that the executives of the estate of the late Mr. James Fairfax AC were not astute enough, in my opinion, to protect the residents of the Fairfax estate from that clause 7.2 in the LEP. Because the purchaser's deed of agreement, for example, had little legitimacy. In fact, had no legitimacy whatsoever in terms of planning legislation. So that's the bind they were in. But the bind that council was in, of course, dealing with what was the provisions of the law, and I'll always support whatever the law is, was, what was permitted in the LEP. Now, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Nelson said, and quite frank, support this very strongly. This has to happen, and in fact, I was hoping that it would come forward as a separate report, because that was my intent, to bring it otherwise than just note a petition. The petition is obviously very relevant, but certainly what's proposed, and the fact that we're getting a nod from Mr. Pepping sounds good, because I couldn't see anything wrong with it. And I support it 100%, because the people in there, quite frank, in that estate have been hoodwinked. And that's my opinion. In other words, sign this agreement, and then, you know, the fact that it doesn't comply with the provisions of the law, the intent was reasonable. I'm quite sure that the estate thought they were doing in their mind, what was the right thing. And of course, the people that purchased there certainly had a sense of security, albeit a false one, as it's turned out. That was most unfortunate. So I agree with that 100%, what's being moved here. And I agree, quite frank, and I will be bringing forward something to try and obliterate this whole problem with corner blocks, because it's right across this shire, and it's been brought in via a standard template which applied to some councils, not all of them. The planners will probably argue it applies to all of them. That did not, because I can bring up a dozen LEPs in similar situations to ours that did not have that clause in it, which is interesting. So they obviously fought harder, and the planners here at the time, which is not Mr. Pepping or Mr. Wilton, clearly felt this was a good idea. They certainly didn't oppose it, that, you know, you could get hold of a corner block and slice it up. So I agree with what's being moved here, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor McLaughlin. You've muted yourself, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Halstead's right on the money there. These people that went in there signed a declaration to abide by the covenant of that land, and they appreciated that everyone would follow suit. The design board, the whole box and dice. Someone was a bit smart and thought, no, I can sign this, and yet I can do what I want to do. And what Councillor Nelson has put forward will prevent someone from doing this in the future. So I'm very much in support, and all those people that wrote into us and signed the petition, including people that had dual occupancy, can I say, 2 houses under the one roof, they weren't separated, they even signed it. So everyone was appalled that this was allowed to go through on our watch, but our hands were tied. That was our LEP, as Councillor Halstead said, that was the law. Someone was clever enough and smart enough to say, well, I don't need to sign this and keep to my word. I can do what I want to do. And they did. And that's unfortunate for everyone else. But this will stop that. Thank you, Councillor Nelson, for putting it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Nelson, the reason I was happy to support this is with a number of us have been on this journey with Redford Park during multiple terms. And of course, this unfortunate loophole caused a lot of angst in the community out there. And moving forward with this and the support of the community out there, that's the way to go. It closes what is a loophole, sadly. And if it needs anything further, obviously Councillor Halstead's on the hunt there too, but this will make sure that you can't subdivide below the 1,000 metre blocks. So that's really good. Thank you.
All right. Any other speakers? No other speakers?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor, I'll sum up. This petition was one of the better petitions that I've seen, and as Councillor McLaughlin talked about, the purchasers agreement, it's listed here in the attachment, and it says, Council will be aware that every purchaser of a lot within Redford Park Estate has entered into a purchasers agreement with the executors under which they agree to abide by the design guidelines and ensure that any person they sell to enters into a further purchaser's deed of agreement with the executors. Now, Councillor Halstead's right, they got caught out. This is hopefully going to correct that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So we'll put that all in favour of Councillor Nelson's recommendation.
It's now a planning matter. So
it's now a planning matter, so everybody's got to vote. Councillors Nelson, Whipper, Gare, Andrews, Halstead. Oh, unanimous. Scandrett.
No,
No,
not unanimous.
You have your hand up. Those against? Councillor Turlin. And declare it carried. Question number 7, question with notice, Station Street upgrade. Oh, no, it's not. Resource recovery,
Centre.
no, recovery cost, 17.1. Will we have somebody like to move it?
No, I've got a recommendation, a motion.
And,
I've got a motion,
you're not
not
moving
the
that.
recommendation.
Okay, what's your recommendation?
My recommendation is that the information session as provided to councillors on the 9th of September be uploaded to council's webpage.
Yep, seconder. Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett, Turlin, you can speak to it.
Okay, look, the issue is that we seem to have an extraordinary amount of money that's actually been out there from the information provided today. And from what I understand, the insurance company has met a lot of those costs to date. And that's all very good. But if you see the question I've got there and council's response, council has funded $10,000 on the excess or a privately owned machine that the insurer now seems to have paid for. Privately owned machine. So the question is quite clear. What does it cost this community in value of money? But unless we upload the information you provided to councillors, from what I understand, I'm not allowed to explain what those costs will be. But if you upload it to the community, they are the ones that are paying the council insurers through their rates, and they need to know what this whole process and what the problems have caused out there, and to make sure the confidence with the community that it doesn't happen again in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. So you've got a seconder. Is there any further debate? Then I put it. All in favour, please raise your cards. Okay, it's carried. 17.3, question with motion. 17.2, resource recovery risk assessment.
Just note it.
Noted. Move Councillor Turlin, seconded Councillor Scandrett. Put it. All in favour. Those against, carried. 17.3, question with notice. Station Street upgrade railway bridge overpass.
Is noted.
Noted.
Can I have a question first?
Turlin, seconded.
No. Can I have a question, please?
Yes, you had seconded Councillor Scandrett. So is there a question, Councillor Turlin?
Was there a plan? It says here there was an estimate of $3 million for the second bridge over Wingecarribee Street back in 2012. Was there a plan performed to get that budget in place in 2012?
Mr. Paul?
I can't answer that, Councillor. I don't believe so, but I can't definitively answer that. I'll take it on notice.
Okay, so do I need to alter the statement there that you'll provide it on notice, or will I put a second part to the motion that you'll provide you'll investigate?
No, councillors will take it on notice and the information will be put in the weekly circular.
Thank you.
Okay, and so it's moved and seconded. Put it. All in favour. Those against, carried. 17.4.
Noted.
Notice. Moves Councillor Turner. Councillor Nelson. Put it. All in favour. Against, carried. 17.5. Question with notice. Traffic count. Moved by Councillor Turlin, seconded by Councillor Scandrett.
Yeah. I want to just a question if I can.
Yes. Councillor Turner.
On the RMS webpage, coming into Mittagong, it shows, it's clearly on the webpage, that we're 2,000 cars entry per day less in 2020 than we were in 2017. Have we done, well, it clearly says we haven't done a traffic count today in Station Street or anywhere they're coming into Barrel.
Well, the only comment back that I think staff would make is we had disastrous bushfires, no tourists on the Highlands during the busiest time. And then, well, I think that's just about it. COVID.
No, well, the traffic count wasn't done in December. I'll have to send it to you so you understand. It would seem that you made a wrong summation of why the traffic is down.
Well, I don't know why the traffic would be down. Who knows? I can't see it declining over the incoming years. Huh?
A lot of going on Old South Road bypassing. Mr. Mayor, could I ask when the traffic count was done in 2017? Am I correct in thinking that it was on a Friday?
Look, I think. Do you wish for more information on the traffic count?
Well, I'm sure Mr. Paul could answer that question.
Yeah, update. Take it on notice and update it.
Okay, let's have a report in the circular. Thank you.
I know back in the beginning of 2000, the traffic count back then at the corner of Bong Bong Station Street was 20 to 21,000 per day.
Well, Mr. Mayor, in the public meeting in September 2017, it was stated, because we'd seen the data modelling, that it was done on a Friday. And I think that goes to the very... Well, because it goes to the very heart of my support for Councillor Turlin's inquiry, and that is...
We are going to get a refined traffic count, okay?
Thank you. Noted, that's good.
Not doing a traffic count.
We'll get the refined numbers, not another traffic count, the numbers.
Yep.
All right. Okay, no more further business. I thank all the community who are watching online for your participation. And you can go and now cook tea or dinner. And I'll ask councillors to move us into closed committee.
And we'll be back after that.
And move Councillor Nelson, second Councillor Andrews. Is there any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Thank you. We are now in